Well, today I'm proud to welcome Matt Vetter, president of Schaeffer Construction in Michigan. We'll learn a little bit more about Matt, his story, and how he created this high performance herd at Schaeffer Construction. Matt, thanks for taking time and joining us today. If you would tell the audience a little bit about you, your origin story, on how you came to Schaeffer Construction. We'll start there, and then we'll dive into some more topics.
Sounds good. And first off, thank you, David, for having me on. It's going to be a fun conversation. I'm sure. I've been looking forward to it.
Awesome.
Um, so yeah, my name's Matt Vetter. I'm the president of Schaeffer Construction. I've owned Schaeffer Construction since 2017, late 2017. Um, my story is probably not that unique compared to a lot of guys in my shoes. I started in the construction industry when I was 17 or 18 years old. I was moving crap around job sites. At the time I got what I thought was a tremendous wage as a young man, getting paid under the table, and it was cash. And, I was a wealthy guy, and that kept me coming back day to day to the kind of the sometimes brutal work of what I was doing. It was really more of a laborer role than anything. Um, that transpired into taking some early leadership roles in the residential sector where I started. I was a foreman on a carpentry crew, a framing crew at one point in time. And then I kind of got the bug, the entrepreneurial bug. So I started my first real company. I say real because my first company was when I was 9, but we won't count that one. It didn't make any money. My first real company I started at about 21, 22 years old, doing residential work. And I was, quite content doing finished basements, decks and garages, things of that nature locally to us here in Metro Detroit. 2007 came, and it came in like a lion, and my clientele was primarily big three auto execs, and those men and those women, they kind of saw the writing on the wall, I think, before a lot of the rest of the industry did. And so work dried up before it all hell broke loose, nationally. I was presented with an opportunity at that point in time to kind of jump to the other side of the spectrum and enter the commercial world, knowing nothing about commercial construction. I'd never touched a metal stud. I didn't know the code differences. But I was a young man. I was newly married. We were talking about having kids. I couldn't just up and die in the residential world. So I made the leap, moved into a company that I basically provided consulting services, construction supervision, project management, estimating, management, everything you could think of kind of for hire. And I worked all around the country, did that for about a decade. At that point in time, I was recruited into a at the time mid-size firm locally here, general contracting firm. They were looking for someone to kind of come in and spearhead a pre-construction department for them. So that's what I did. Went in and helped them get that stood up and running. 4.5 years later, I was again sick of being an employee. I need to have some of my own skin in the game. So that's when I jumped. I left, bought Schaeffer Construction, and I haven't looked back. So we can get as deep as you want, but that's the history in a nutshell there.
So in that change from, hey, I'm working for someone else, I'm a general laborer, there's always some, I say always, usually some, I'll call it epiphany that, hey, I want to lead. I want to build something bigger than myself. What's the origin of that for you, if you can remember?
I think I've had the entrepreneurial bug forever. That's what it was, barring my exploits as a 9-year-old. But, even my first job working in residential, just moving lumber around, I watched my boss, and he wasn't a great guy. Let me rephrase that. He was a good guy. He was a terrible businessman. Okay. But he spent a career in a corporate job. And by the time he was in his, probably my age, mid 40s, he couldn't take it anymore. And he quit. He took a risk on everything and went from being a corporate bean counter or whatever he was to opening up a residential construction company. He didn't know the first thing about building anything. So as a young man, I was kind of I hate to say mentored because again, his teachings weren't the most scrupulous, but I was, I saw what he was doing and it was intriguing to me. And I thought, wow, this isn't normal, quote unquote. But this guy has made a leap of faith and he is creating his own path. He is 100% to blame and he is 100% to benefit on whatever happens here. And that really stuck with me at a pretty young age, and it never left.
So we'll jump to the origin of Schaeffer. I'm sure you have these illusions like this is going to be great. I'm buying this company. Here's my entrepreneurial jump off, and this is going to be fantastic. Instead, give us what was it when you first purchased Schaeffer? What was the company like? Size, challenge, what was going on? What did you buy? What was it?
Yeah. So Schaeffer Construction has been around since the late 90s, 1997 to be exact. Um, it was primarily a one-man band um, by a gentleman with the last name that matches the company name. He ran it largely by himself for basically 19, 20 years. He did okay. He had very little overhead. It was him. Sometimes he would have an office assistant type person, but that was really the extent of it. He had no project managers, no superintendents. He did everything, and as such, he did okay at the revenue levels he was at. In my head, when I was reviewing options and thinking about what I wanted to do, because I knew I didn't want to work, let alone at the place I was at, I didn't want to work for anybody else ever again, unless all heck breaks loose. Um, so reviewing options, I looked at this company. It's got namesake. It's been based in the same location for its entire duration, which is a nice Midwestern suburban Detroit city, affluent population. There are lots of businesses around. There's still land available, which is huge in the Metro Detroit area. Most everything now is covered in concrete or asphalt. And the name was out there. The name had been there for 20 some years. So in my head, I thought, wow, this makes sense. What I'm buying is the namesake. I knew I didn't want to continue operating the way that my predecessor had. In hindsight, and I was asking myself this question on my drive here, actually, because I knew you were going to ask me if I could do it again. If I knew now or if I knew then what I know now, rather, I'm not sure I would have done it the same way. If I'm being honest, it came with its probably more so share of stress, of headache, of unsurety. And looking back, starting a business, I've done it before. I know what it entails. It's hard no matter which way you slice it. And I think what I did to myself by being blinded by the perception I had of this namesake that was going to help make things easier, I think I made it a lot harder. Now, you can't go back and change the past, and I'm very, very happy with where we're at now. We've had tremendous growth in revenue and profitability. We've grown to a team where, I'm proud of the people inside my four walls there, and it's just it's a funny story, right? Because you never really know what you're getting into until you're in it, and hindsight is always 20/20. But I think it's a good topic for this show.
Yeah, no, Matt, and I think that's the reason for this podcast is like, what was the journey? How did I climb? What did it mean? How did I get to this high performing team? And so, you start with, hey, it's kind of a one person solo entrepreneur business. Is sounds like, hey, the business was okay. There was a place to jump off of, and you go, but in hindsight, I could have just done the same thing without the name and figured out how to do it. um, as soon as you get into the business and start to realize what it is, and you and I spent some time earlier. Clearly, you wanted more. I always start to frame leadership as well, how do I inspire people to believe something? And almost starts with ourselves. Like, well, what do I want to believe about the journey in front of me? What do I want this thing to become? And how do I start talking about it in a way that I call powerfully and passionately that people then want to follow? They believe this vision forward is the right thing, and we inspire people. Early in that, clearly, because you and I talked, you're like, well, I want it to be something different than what it was. If you had to try to capture the essence of like, well, what did I believe at the time, and how did I start communicating and inspiring others? What was it around?
I think that's part of the problem I had, David, is that I didn't really know the answer to that question before I made the leap. I kind of just jumped in head first and I thought, well, this is what I want. I want to be an owner in business again. I want to run a successful construction company. I want to, but I never took the time then to really spell out what is Matt's vision? What is this big picture I'm trying to create? And I think that was part of my heartburn, is that I didn't do my due diligence before I fully immersed myself back in the world of entrepreneurship. It was, probably a couple years in before I actually sat down with myself and then again with my business partner at the time and really started spelling out what that means.
So give us the beginnings of that. Like, hey, and almost always I call it, there's an epiphany that creates a like, oh, this isn't what I want. I want something better. And there's usually a couple. And the first is like, oh, well, what am I trying to do here? Like, why do we exist is kind of a common question for companies to answer. And where are we headed? And most companies don't go through that exercise. So what for you created that? Well, I need to do it. And what were the early thinkings around it for Schaeffer?
So there was two definite points in memory. One was the first 2 months that I was there. I basically sat in my office with the door closed, staring out the window, wondering what in the hell I'd just done. Right. Again, at this point now I've got 3 children, happily married with 3 kids. There's a lot on my shoulders, man. And I didn't know what I was doing. And I sat there thinking, you have just screwed yourself. And it was for what? That was number one. Number two, I'm an old EOS guy, and you and I talked about that a bit. The company I was at for a short time there, kind of half in, half out, ran EOS. So I was at least well versed on what it was. It was that point in time I read Traction again for probably the 4th time, and I realized, well, here's what's missing. I just did what I just told you, right? I jumped in head first. I had no plan. I had no vision. I had no structure on what I wanted, and I wasn't going to get that from the other people in the company at the time, because they had just existed, to their own tune for so long that there was no reason to change. So that was the turning point. Was rereading Traction, not to overly glorify the system, but it's really pretty simple in that you need to sit down, you need to figure out your why, you need to figure out what is your vision, what are you trying to create, and that's what really spawned that process that in my head.
And so early days of Schaefer, once you kind of revisit EOS and think about it, can you take people through like, well, here are the things that we were considering. Here was why we exist. Here's what was different. Here's how this new vision first inspires you, and likely like, all right, as I grow the team, I need people that will help me live into this. I call it inspire people to believe, and then get them inspired to take action toward the belief. That's what makes the difference. And so what was the early thinking?
Um, so I started off filling out the VTO, and that is kind of a guideline and an outline rather to building your vision. It helped me to get structured on what I wanted. And so originally, truth be told, I just put dollar values on a lot of things. I want to be a company of this many dollars in revenue. Fast forward, almost 9 years, and I recognize that revenue it's a vanity metric that means very, very little, but it was a starting point. And
Yeah.
so I started crafting my vision, and I said, I'm going to be a company that is at this level, and I'm going to be, my vision has to be so big that everybody that works underneath me can fit inside of my own vision. Their visions can fit inside my own. So I have to really start thinking outside of the box, and I have to make these giant audacious goals and be public with them, at least public, internally to the company, so that we can proceed with that. So that was number one. Number two, I forced the creation and documentation of core values. And that's been a driving force in our company since that day. Now, it was a process. It was nothing easy to try and come up with, essentially 2 different sets of value systems and mesh them together in something that we could agree on. But we came up with some. We came up with 5, and they've, with the exception of 1, they've largely not been changed since then. But it was those 2 things. So it was creating a vision big enough for everyone to fit in inside it, and then also structuring core values, because that's how we were able to start building a culture, and that's really why we're doing what we're doing, right? Is to create somewhere people want to be, that's helping my teammates, it's helping the industry in general.
So we'll leap off that a little bit. We'll come back to core values in a second. But if you look at your vision today, so well, first let's talk a little bit about what's happened to Schaefer. So you start, I think if I recall, it was $1 million company roughly, and whether you want to share that in this, but you were one person kind of. I think
Yeah.
your wife along helping, and you go, well, now what does Schaefer look like?
Um, a lot bigger than that. we've we, we've we've doubled and doubled and doubled, and then some. We're at a level now where we're, call it 25x where we started, comfortably, and we're going. Our goals are much higher than that, and it's been that driving force of everything we've talked about.
So my take on this for all people who have lived through this journey is that this, what do I want people to believe? Core values. It's unending, and the way I frame it is better is better. Like, how do we improve? How do we do it? When I ran organizations, I talked about the elusive carrot that will be dangling in front of us, that we'll get better, and we'll ask for more. And this is the best organizations on the planet wrestle with this. I call momentum and quality. How do we gain enough momentum, do it well, to create that flywheel that we're doing things moving forward? If today you said, here's what I want my team inspired to believe, here's our number one goal, here's our vision of future for Schaefer, how would you talk about it today?
Much differently than I did back then. Now my focus is, don't get me wrong, I'm not so virtuistic that I don't consider myself and my own family. That's always top of stack for me. But my real focus is creating true futures for the people that work with me. Right? I want to see people get wealthy. I want to see the people I work with and that work with me and for me. I want to see them be able to buy their first house, or buy their first car, or put their kid through college, or whatever it may be. That's my driving focus every day when I wake up now. I'm not even close to stopping, and I'm not at a point where I'm comfortable with where I'm at that I could just go off and float for the rest of my life on a sailboat. But my mindset shifted a lot, and the biggest goal I have is making sure that I'm constantly painting the vision to my people, and constantly selling that they can believe me that I'm going to get it. And if I'm telling them, like, this is where we're going to go, these are the targets we're going to chase after, the goals we're going to hit, that by God, we're going to get there. That's my job day in and day out at this point.
So I always frame this is a part of the compelling magnet that brings people toward us, and that this why we exist, vision of future, and core values are what fuel that. It's the, well, who's right for us? How do we do this? And there's examples all around us. You and I talked a little bit that I'm in Bloomington, Indiana, and Signetti's rise from the losingest football team ever to national championship in 2 years is, there's a lot of fundamentals there that are that. And he talked about, I needed to change the way people thought and believed about winning. And he shares a lot of stories. And then he said, and then we got to take action toward it. And so it's a never ending. And I hear an evolution of, well, me versus now take care of the team. You have really good core values. I'll have you share those here in a minute. But there's always the, where are we headed? And for Schaefer, if you said, like, simply, we're headed here, this is our North Star, this is why people choose us, this is why we win, this is how we want to be recognized, how would you talk about that today?
We want to be recognized as the problem solvers. The way we do business is very different than your average construction firm. We're not a typical general contractor. We can go as deep into that as you want, but we want to be known as the guys that when owners and developers have difficult projects or difficult problems that they can't solve on their own, or they don't want to, we're the people they call, because they know we can take it on. We represent all of our clients as if we were their fiduciary, if we were their actual partner, whether we're financial partners or not, and we can solve those problems, and we can make the construction process, which historically has always been labeled as a stressful, miserable thing to go through. we can take that and turn it into an experience that, by the time we're done, these people, our clients and our friends, will actually say to us like, wow, that was actually kind of fun. That wasn't as bad as everybody told me. That's what we do. That's what makes it fun for us, is that we can provide that.
Well, and Matt, you have that in your first two core values. I'm looking at them right now on the screen. It says put the project first and be the problem solver. So you've outlined that for your team. You've described it on your website. I'm sure that, I talk about this inside of companies. They become alive, real. They're in the room with us. It's just the way we do things. This is part of that magnet that those who want to be put the project first, be a problem solver, shine. They come here. They want to go, we're not going to ignore this minor thing that could be better. There's a pursuit of better that becomes, I always talk about it in the room. And, this is the elusive, like we're on that path. We're getting better at all of these. This is the litmus test in which we measure. If you talked about that today, like either your core values, this vision of being a problem solving company, how has it moved the organization?
Oh, it's moved us tremendously. I think our so in my mind, core values are what eventually will create a culture. You can't have one without the other, but I think there's an order that has to happen. I think it's your value system first.
Well, and Matt, I'll interrupt. Sorry for a moment.
Yeah.
It creates an intentional culture.
Fair. Yes. Yes. If you don't intentionally create your culture, you will be left with hot garbage. And it's
Yeah, you'll have one. It just won't be the things that you have on the sheet of paper. They need to be alive and well,
yes.
intentional about them, litmus test. And that's why I talk about them. They're in the room. We look at them and analyze how we're doing against them all the time.
Yeah, completely. And that's our one of our big things is everybody says they have core values. A lot of people put them on a poster and they put them in their boardroom or their war room, and they show clients when they come in. They say, "Look at how great we are. This is what we believe in." But that's where they stop.
Yeah.
Ours are different. It truly embodies everything we do. We hire by our values. We fire by our values. We pick our teams, and when I say teams, I'm talking about outside of our four walls. We are very team based, so we pick the subcontractors that we're going to work with, the consultants, the vendors. We all have to have at least a general idea that we're all in the same value system and that we can all play in the same culture pool here. Same with our clients. We're very selective about who we work for because it's too stressful of a profession, too stressful of an industry to not have fun, right? If we would just go work for every a-hole out there that wants to build something, a lot of people do that. That's not
Yeah.
us. So we built the culture around being very selective, and it all starts with that value system.
So tell me a little bit about the I'll call it growth from one to few to more, and the role these core values have had in choosing, selecting, keeping, hiring, firing. Like, how do they show up daily? And I'm really curious about your last one. So if you can infuse that into the story, it'd be awesome. Which is have 100-0 mindset. So it's 100% or it's zero. Which is a high standard, but I frame for everyone that like expectations are what drive all this. And so, however, you can talk about and weave a little story around that in terms of growing the team, infusing a mindset, having a standard, measuring, hiring, coaching, firing around that, it would be awesome.
Well, you just nailed it, right? Your core values, in my mind, have to become your standard, because if you operate outside of a standard, or if worse, you don't have any standards, you're operating in chaos, and it's not sustainable. So when I say we hire by these values, we do. We ask very pointed questions throughout the interview process that reflect each of our 5 core values, and we've done this for long enough that we can get a really good idea, a really good gut check if someone's going to fit in with us or not. Right? We look at resumes because we have to. We look at experience depending on the role. It's more important than others. But at the end of the day, especially by the time they get to me, we've structured our recruiting system so that I'm the last gate, but all the hard questions are done by the time it gets to me now. I need to sit down with someone and make sure they're going to fit with that culture. And it's through questioning and through really digging into stories that they can tell me, that an applicant can tell me, that revolve around our 5 values. So you mentioned the last one. That is my personal favorite, and it's have a 100 to 0 mindset. So I have a coach. I have lots of coaches and mentors, but two in particular are a guy named Annie Frisella and a guy named Ed Milet. And the two of them kind of together put this idea in my head that winning is more fun than fun is fun. Now, a lot of people look at that or hear that and they're like, "Ooh, that's too aggressive." Well, that's tough. We are in an aggressive industry. We're an aggressive company. And so the 100 to 0 mindset means if we're going to commit resources, if we are as a company going to decide we're going to go after a project, go after a client, go after a candidate for a role, we want to not just go on our proverbial playing field and win. We want to win 100 to 0. We want to make the other team go home crying because we beat them so badly they don't want to play again. And that's the aggressive impatience that pervades our culture in a very good way. It keeps us on our toes. It keeps us all fighting for the same goal. Again, it's not for everybody, but it's a great way to weed people out too.
Well, and Matt, for the longest time, I've said compel and repel. I have a TEDx talk that talks about it. Like, no, we build this magnet that will compel and repel. The stronger the magnet, if we keep fueling it, it will attract the right people, but it will repel the wrong people. And
Yeah.
there are many organizations that look at that as a bad thing. Like, we got to be good to all. And I go, no, we need to be good to the ideal client profile. We need to be good to the work we want. We need to do things the way we do them. And high performing organizations do that. They go, we are this, we are clearly that, we will pour into it. You know, whether you talk about strategy, competitive advantage, the way we act and behave, our culture, the more defined and the more compelling, the easier it becomes. There's not, you know, it's what you talked about before, kind of the hot mess culture. Like, no, we know what ours is. And so when someone walks in, we know whether they're right or wrong for us. And if we're not sure when they start, I used to joke and go, this will be Sesame Street. If you're the one that's not like the others, it will be evident. And we will eventually ask you to leave. That most of us are these 5 core values. So it becomes the litmus test for growth. If I have you jump forward 3 to 5 years and go, what's happened at Schaeffer in the, I'll call it, advancement of mission, vision, why we exist, vision, core values, the size, the culture, what do you aspire for it to be?
Well, the culture, I don't think it changes. I think maybe it percolates and maybe it gets more refined, more condensed and boiled down to really what drives us. But I think the culture stays largely the same. I think, you know, from a numbers perspective, I think in 3 to 5 years we're going to double again in revenue. To do that, we bring more people into the team. Now we're not a huge firm. We never will be. We're not. The goal here is never to be so big that there's dark corners and layers of bureaucracy where people can hide. That's not how we serve our clients. So
Yeah.
we're always going to be lean and aggressive, knowing though that we have to staff properly so we don't have burnout and it's not too stressful. But you know that's where we are in 3 to 5 years. Is we're double where we are now.
Awesome. So there's again kind of a metric of, hey, we continue to grow. I would love to be double. That could be size, revenue, profit, I mean, whatever thing is there. If you think about that stage of growth and what's required, what will be the hardest challenge, change that Schaefer will have to go through?
The people, man, people are the are the hardest thing to deal with. The hardest. They're the hardest nut to crack. You know, it's almost like most of my time is spent more so being a psychologist than a construction guy. And I mean that with all due respect. Our team is great, but trying to figure out all the different personalities and the quirks and the way people act and operate and work, it's a full-time job in and of itself. And when you start adding more people, that problem just compounds on itself.
So, you know, and I'll frame again, you got a really strong start of a magnet. So that should be the guiding. And you're clearly saying, yeah, I want the culture. I want those things. I want it. I go, yeah, well, then I got to use that as a litmus test to continue to do that. And yeah, as we grow and expand, clearly that's that. A key, that's a key component of that I got to keep hiring the right people, that I have a way in which has worked for us and I need to stay consistent there. I talk to CEOs, and I'm sure you've had this, that as I grow the company, there's a period in which it feels like I'm doing everything, to, oh, things are going really well when we talk about this people in the next stage of growth, that there's moments where we go, well, I feel kind of lazy. Like I'm not doing anything. The company's awesome and I'm doing less and less. Have you had that experience?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it didn't feel like I was doing everything. There was moments in time when I literally was doing everything. I was I was doing the estimating, I was doing the sales, I was managing projects, I was superintending in the field, I was doing the accounting and the bookkeeping and the billing, and I was doing everything. Now fast forward, a number of years, and I've built a really strong and great team around me. And specifically in the last, call it 6 months, 5, 6 months, that feeling of what the hell am I supposed to do anymore has kind of hit me like a brick in the face a few times, because instead of having to do everything now I've got people in place that handle the estimating at a very, very high level and handle the sales at a high level. And all of these functions are largely held or are largely um, completed at a very high level by my team. So it kind of has left me sitting here twiddling my thumbs some days, thinking like, well, what now? What do I do now? And it's, we can get into that, I'm sure, but it's a weird feeling. It's a weird feeling from a guy who's worked his tail off his entire career to now feeling like I'm not doing enough.
I'll call this evolution from I'm doing whatever my business does
Mhm.
to I'm leading a company that does this in a remarkable way. And
Yeah.
that's two different things. And you've described it. I think EOS and other business operating systems help us with that planning. And I go back to the statement I said earlier. It's about inspiring people to believe in something. It's then getting them to take action toward those beliefs. And whatever way in which we look at doing that has me over and over in the last 20 years of reflection running companies and now helping a couple hundred companies a year do it, is like it's that is what it's about. And so when we do it really well, we miss the I'm doing the work, and instead going, well, no, I'm a remarkably effective leader and I have a high performing team here and I have people that will do that. And that becomes, again, an ever constant challenge. Where I want to spend a few minutes is, well, I felt that now, I've done that. I now need to embrace, I'll call it the leadership component of vision, values, expectation, engagement, whatever operating system, EOS, scaling up, and or just culture development, something like Lencioni's Advantage or Jim Collins' Good to Great. All of these point to the same thing. Like I need people that are awesome doing things, and then I need to, you know, lead with clarity. Here's where we're headed. Let great people do good work, and that in the next phase of that there will be challenge. There will be like, well, do I have the right person for this? Do I have the right team or concept, or do we understand strategy to go move in this direction or expand geographically or whatever that is? As you look at this next leap of, I'll call it scale, what will be the challenge? I understand the people side, but more specifically, like, well, what about the people?
Well, part of it's the natural attrition of things, right? In that we're not that old of a company. So this transition from me doing everything to me doing most things to me still doing a lot to now me in a different role has been relatively quick. And a lot of my current team has been around to see different stages of that transition. And so one of my challenges now is I call it the fail fast and learn from it idea. And that I've got people who I know are qualified or well on their way to being qualified to do the roles that I have them doing. But there are times when you can tell the confidence isn't there, and they don't want to screw up. And part of that's a lot of it, if not all of it's probably my fault, because I'm a control freak. I want things done my way. I want it done my way is right, and that's how I have survived for as long as I have. But Where I've morphed into now is I have to be more of a teacher, and I have to let my people know that, listen, you're going to screw up. You're going to touch that stove and you're going to burn the crap out of your hand, but promise me you only do it once, right? Burn yourself. Let's learn from it so we don't do it again, and then move on. And then we're all stronger for it.
So Matt, you're talking about in my language where I'm going to clearly set an expectation. Like the expectation is we will be excellent. That doesn't mean we'll be perfect.
Yeah.
That means we will try and fail and move and grow, and that we'll be smart and wise about it. And the aggressive pursuit of better will be rewarded. The complacency of average won't be. That I'll push you hard to do more and do this. So that's awesome. That's an awesome, I'll call it self-awareness of where I'm at and what I need to do. Um, in this journey, and I always like to help because there's so many entrepreneurs that are earlier in the journey than you, and there are people that are, further along. There are many that like I'm constantly pushing, fixing. I have a team that's not as good as we should be. We're struggling, and I'll use that word loosely. What would you tell people that are in that position? Like, what's the path forward? What's the thing you should think about? What's the action to take? Here's what I've done. Whatever comes to mind, Matt.
I'd tell them to join the club, right? We're never going to hit that level of where I think we're doing perfect or where I think we can stop. And so I think it's, you have to, as a leader, you have to be prepared to be constantly teaching, constantly evolving. You have to be a cheerleader when your people need it. You have to be a administrator when they need that, right? You have to put people in timeout, for lack of better terms, when they screw up, but you have to do it in a way that, okay, look, you're here because I believe in you. We've already been through our core values. I know you're a fit to our culture. Otherwise, we wouldn't be having these conversations, period. We're at that level now where, we I don't want to go too far back, but we talked about a little bit. We fire people when we have to. That's for egregious stuff that comes up. But if people make it through the gates and they don't really embody our values, they find their way back to that gate on their own more often than not. And that's where we have to really drive it into the people that stay, right? Those who stay will be champions. It says that in my favorite college team's locker room. And I believe that wholeheartedly. So you're here for a reason. Now let's talk about how we can help you and how we can build that confidence and get you to the level where you need to be so that we can go where we need to go.
Yeah, I mean, we talked a little bit about expectations. I'll pile on there here that becomes I don't have to fire. I just need to continually reinforce the expectation, both around how we act and behave here, core values, and how we perform. And if I just keep saying you're not meeting the expectation, most people will start to realize like I don't belong here, either from a culture perspective or a productivity. One of the tools we use in the operating system we have is it looks at both of those regularly. Like, how are you performing in the locker room, I call it, and how are you playing on the field? And I need you to be good at both. And in many of the organizations I work with, Matt, I go, you got to be average or better in both. To stay here, you got to be average or better. And that doesn't mean you need to be a rah, bleed our colors at a 10, but you can't be a 1.
Yeah.
And then on the field, if you're a 2 regularly on a 10 scale, we're going to tell you where the expectation is. We need you to get to average or better. And, this becomes a weird thing because, well, if we look at our new average, I go, yeah, our new average gets higher and higher every year. Our new levels of culture fit and performance, and this becomes this flywheel hedgehog. I mean, we get better. And so again, now the magnet's stronger. Now it's fueled. Now the right people are there. We know what good looks like. And doesn't mean we still won't bring people into the organization that don't work. And so, when I see this concept of, man, we're struggling, I go, I got to apply that. Like, I got to set higher expectations, not lower. I need to go talk and train that, like, I need this from you. I need to inspire people to believe we can do better and then push toward it. And that you described that. So, um, just in our last little bit, if there's something that you go, man, I would want the entrepreneur listener to understand this, that, this is words to the wise. This is, man, here's as I reflect on the journey at Schaeffer or in my career and you talked about one of them, like, well, I wish I would have thought about this and even like the namesake Schaeffer and would have been better. But there's always more than that we wish we could share with someone that's in the journey we're on, but could help them. What comes to mind along that, Matt?
So I've been asked this before in a different way. I've been asked a lot what I would, if I could go back, what would I tell my 20-year-old
Younger self.
self, my
Younger
10-year-old
self.
self,
Yeah.
And here's what I would say. I'd say if you decide to go on this journey, no matter if you're in construction or accounting or whatever it is you do, if you decide to take this leap as an entrepreneur, it will be harder than you ever thought possible. It will be more challenging in more ways than you ever think you can deal with. Now, on the flip side, as long as you don't quit, as long as you don't give up, it can be and will be the most rewarding thing you've ever done, but it comes at a huge cost. It's not for everybody. And I say that with all due respect, but we've become this social media driven age where everybody is an entrepreneur. Everybody on Instagram is driving a Lamborghini and they did it by drop shipping t-shirts. Well, you got to recognize that most of that is BS. And this life is not for everyone. If you choose it and you do it and you want it, then by God, go after it and go as hard as you can and don't stop. But just know that it's going to be the hardest thing you've ever done.
And Matt, again, purchased Schaeffer in what year?
2017.
Yeah, so this is my take on this every time I hear this entrepreneurial success is that we tend to look at it like it's overnight success. You're like, no, I bought this thing in 2017. You're 8 years into the journey and you're doing remarkably well, but to go, yeah, I've done what I need to do, or it's over, or I'm at the level of success I need. And um, the path I do this, I do a lot of coaching, and Vistage, which is a peer-to-peer advisory group, gives this advice. They're like, at some point, you're going to wake up in the future and go, everything I've done to this point is malpractice. And we look at the evolution of leadership, the evolution of doing something, building skill, and it's the 10,000 hours, it's the 10 years, it's the I've figured out what works and doesn't work that is there. So I love that. Like, yeah, it won't happen without hard work. It will happen when you're intentional, inspire people to believe, move a team along, and you get more from people than you would have yourself. And it's all part of this high performing herd. So I appreciate that. Anything else?
I just really appreciate the time, David. It's been a fun conversation.
Matt, thanks. If people wanted to find more about you, Schaeffer, follow your journey, where should they go?
LinkedIn is the easiest way to find me personally, Matt Vetter on LinkedIn. Our company website is schaefferconstruction.net. It's SCHAFER. Those are the two easiest ways to track us down.
Awesome. And we didn't do this, and I always like to at least kind of close. Anyone looking for what in what area should explore Schaeffer?
Any owner or developer looking to produce product, to build buildings, to take care of buildings certainly in the Metro Detroit, Southeast Michigan area should contact us immediately. Anyone looking to move outside of our area should also contact us because those plans are in the works too.
Awesome. That's good to hear. Matt, really appreciate your time. Enjoyed the conversation. Thanks.
Likewise, David. Thank you.